Good evening. Thank you for attending. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:35 p.m. We'll open the meeting by having a recommendation that the special meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater on June 19, 2017 come to order at 6:35. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coghlan, Councillor McConkey. Does anybody have disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I'd like to move on to the purpose of this meeting. The recommendation is that this public meeting of council held under section 17, 21, and 34 of the Planning Act for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw, amendment file number OP 216-005 and ZB 216-021 be called to order at 6:37 p.m. And can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Coghlan, Councillor Ritchie, thank you. All in favor? Carried. Welcome to this public meeting of the Springwater Township Council held in compliance with Section 17, 21, and 34 of the Planning Act to give the public an opportunity to express their views in regard to a proposed amendment to the Township of Springwater official plan and zoning bylaw as amended. The first part of this meeting is to present the amendments. Following that, an opportunity will be given to enable those who have any comments, concerns, or inquiries with regard to this proposal to make their views known to council. In addition to any comments made at this meeting, written presentations are also welcomed by the council. If a person or public body who files an appeal of a decision of the Township of Springwater in respect of a proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment does not make an oral submission at this public meeting or written submissions to the Township of Springwater before the proposed official plan is adopted and zoning bylaw amendment is passed, the Ontario Municipal Board may dismiss all or part of the appeal. So for any people wishing to speak tonight should please come up to the microphone and give their name and address. All comments or questions should be addressed through the chair, please. Oral submissions will form part of the public meeting minutes record, including the name and address of the speaker, as information is collected under the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, and the minutes of this meeting will be posted on the Township website. I will now call upon the clerk to confirm notice of this meeting and the dates on which this notice was given.
Notice of this public meeting was mailed on the 23rd day of May 2017 to the owner of the subject lands and to the assessed owners of 408 properties in the Township of Springwater within 2 kilometers of the area to which the proposed amendment would apply, and to all persons and public bodies as prescribed under the Planning Act and its regulations. Notice was also placed in Springwater News on May 18th with reminders on June 1st and June 15th. Notice was also posted at the assessed property to which the proposed amendment applies at a location that was visible from Horseshoe Valley Road West and Rainbow Valley Road East.
Has the Planning Department received any correspondence in response to the notice of the public meetings?
There have been 85 pieces of correspondence received from January 9th to June 19th, 2017. All are available for public viewing on the Township of Springwater's website.
Thank you, Clerk. So tonight we are here to receive information, to receive your comments, any questions that you have. Decisions won't be made tonight, but we'll be taking the information. GHD is here with its representatives. The county is here to make a presentation we're about to receive. So this is an opportunity for you, as well as any written submissions, to make any oral submissions. I will now call upon Brian Dermody, Steve Edwards, Tej Gita, and Laura Lawler from GHD to provide a brief explanation of the purpose and effect of the proposal. As I said, we also have with us tonight from the county, and welcome Debbie Korolnik and Rod McCullough.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Everybody hear me okay in the back? Excellent. So we have a brief presentation to go through. We'll have a chance for questions afterwards, and if you can't see the slides clearly, we can also sort of revisit them later on as well. So I'm Brian Dermody, environmental engineer with GHD. I've been the project manager on this project for the last 3 years or so. I'm joined with my colleagues here tonight, Mr. Steve Edwards, who is an environmental planner, Dr. Tej Gita, who is a principal with GHD and specializing in organic waste management, and Laura Lawler, who has done a lot of the environmental work out at the site. We also have Dave Richardson from MMM here, who's done some of the traffic analysis as well. So. The middle one. Aiming.
Just while we're waiting for that, if people are standing in the back, there are lots of empty chairs up here in the front if you would like to have a seat.
Okay, so just to step through some of the background on this project. So the Environmental Resource Recovery Center really stemmed from the county's solid waste management strategy. And in that, there was a direction for no new landfills to be established in the county. So this organic facility is a direct result of that direction. It aligns with provincial waste strategies in terms of the Waste Free Ontario Act and moving towards a circular economy, viewing waste more as a resource. And also shows environmental leadership in terms of the county securely managing their own materials. So what's involved in the Environmental Resource Recovery Center? There's a few components. The two main ones are the materials management facility. So that's really a transfer station. That's to take the curbside vehicles that collect the waste and organics, recyclables, transfer that into larger vehicles for further distribution to processing centers. And then an organics processing facility, which will take the organics fraction of that. Also part of the ERC will be a servicing facility for the county's solid waste management vehicles. And a potential material recovery facility in the future, so that would be for processing the recyclable materials, as well as ancillary facilities such as public education center, administration facilities, stormwater management, things like that. So quick project overview in terms of where we are in the process. You can see the green bar there sort of halfway down in the planning and engineering stage. So a lot of work has gone into it up to this point to get to where we are in terms of pre-planning and going through the siting process, looking at a whole variety of sites. And as we go through this, we step into the design, followed by construction, and then finally operation of the facilities. It's also important to note that things start to divert a little bit here in terms of the materials management facility as well as the organics processing facility. They will follow separate sort of development and construction timelines with the MMF coming online first. So the siting framework in terms of the process that was followed, the general approach was modeled on the Minister of the Environment's Statement of Environmental Values in terms of considering the prevention of impacts and the protection of the existing environment. It's important to note that this facility is not subject to an environmental assessment. However, that was still followed and used sort of as a framework for the consultation and just going through the process. That's not to be confused with the environmental compliance approval, which is conditions basically put on the operation and design of the facility by the Ministry of the Environment as well in terms of how it operates. So that will still apply to both facilities. So we've had stakeholder and public consultation throughout the entire process and County Council approval as well at key milestones. So siting process was broken down into 3 key parts there. You can see a bit of a timeline across the bottom. Part 1 was the siting methodology and evaluation criteria. That was really establishing the framework to step through the evaluation process. Part 2 was the long list evaluation. So once we'd identified a list of sites, which was over 502 sites we started with, and then we sort of stepped through the process, evaluating those sites against various criteria, environmental, technical, various different components on the different screens, screen 1 and screen 2. And then we narrowed that down to a shorter list and then stepped through a similar evaluation on those sites when we're down to about 7. And then, so the result of that ultimately is heading to the preferred site, which is 2976 Horseshoe Valley Road West in Springwater. So at the stage 3, to get to that as the preferred site, that was evaluated relative to all of the other shortlisted sites. So it was a comparative sort of analysis against all of the criteria, but also against all of the other sites to land on that one as the preferred site. So it offered a number of advantages compared to the other sites, including the size, layout, and topography, the flexibility of those to establish a facility in sort of multiple areas within this property. There's few constraints under the environmental criteria, which also helps in terms of flexibility for siting the footprint. Fewer sensitive receptors, such as residents. Greater buffer distances can be established between the site and those sensitive receptors, and that helps with things like odor, noise, those sort of potential issues. So the central location also offers transportation efficiencies in terms of where the waste is being generated within the county and where it's going to after the fact. And also a relatively small increase in terms of local traffic on Horseshoe Valley Road. So the preferred site you can see there is bounded by Horseshoe Valley Road in the south and Rainbow Valley Road in the north, just to the west of Highway 400 there. So various technical supporting studies have been completed and are still ongoing. So this first page is all of the studies that have been undertaken by GHD. You can see quite a few there. The facility characteristics report is a key one. That touches on conceptual site plan, which I'll get into in just a second, functional servicing in terms of water, sewage, hydro, all those kind of things, stormwater management, as well as noise and odor assessments. Various additional studies have also been carried out in terms of an agricultural impact assessment, archaeological assessment, cultural heritage, as well as traffic. So technical review of all of those studies, and we've been consulting with various regulatory agencies and other stakeholders again throughout this process. You can see quite the list there. So I touched on the Minister of the Environment. They have a significant role in terms of approving this facility and establishing conditions for its operation, but also dealing with other agencies such as Ministry of Transportation, Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority, Indigenous communities, as well as other peer review consultants. So there is the conceptual site layout for the property. You can see the yellow line there is the actual property boundary. So that's 84 hectares in total. You can see the colored area in the middle there, which is the proposed development area for the ERC, which is only 4.5 hectares of the total property footprint. So there is an existing access road or trail that goes through the site. We're going to maximize the use of that to minimize any potential sort of clearing of other areas, so really to minimize the impact on this property. Sort of a look at the site features and surrounding area. Again, you can see the proposed footprint right in the middle there. So through the archaeological assessment, a find was identified in the site. That's the red box there. So the footprint was actually relocated based on some of that information, as well as the blue you can see there. Those are wetlands that were identified on the property. So we've again relocated the footprint to maintain minimum buffer distances required away from those sort of sensitive features. And you can also see the yellow dots on there, sensitive receptors. So we've included two dashed lines from the actual property line, not from the facility footprint, but those reflect, I believe, 200 and 500 meters away. And again, maximizing those sort of separation distances helps to improve things like noise and odor. Bit of a more detailed look at the actual footprint. So you can see on the left side there, setback from the wetlands as well as the archaeological area. And then you can see sort of a proposed layout for the various components of the facility, with the green in the middle being the largest. That's reserved for the organics processing facility. The orange in the bottom right corner for the materials management facility, yellow for the future materials recovery facility, and red for the administration. Purple is for the scales, and blue is for the stormwater management facility. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Steve, who's going to go over some of the planning aspects.
Thank you, Brian, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Very briefly about some of the planning aspects, and the purpose of this meeting relates to that first bubble on this slide under the Planning Act, since public meeting must be held for both the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment. In the county official plan, the property is designated greenlands. Worth pointing out that infrastructure is permitted in any designation in the plan, but on the next slide I'll explain why for that official plan amendment. Township official plan is rural, and the zoning is agricultural. I did notice the second bubble here is engineering studies. Brian's already pointed out there's been a number done, but it's also important to point out that based on input either from the public, council, staff, and the other agencies, there may be further work that needs to be done on any or all of these studies. Should there be approval of the official plan amendments and zoning, then the development would go through a site plan approval process with the township, environmental compliance approval, and then, of course, building permits. Again, I mentioned, at least at the regional plan level, infrastructure is permitted, but the official plans do have wording that say new waste disposal facilities do require amendments to the plan, so that's why these plans need amending. Zoning needs amending for another reason, because it just doesn't permit this use. One other thing to point out is this uses the term waste disposal. That is because that's the term that's used in the official plan. There's no intention of disposing of, that is leaving materials permanently at the site, and certainly my recommendation is that in the wording of both, should it be approved by councils, both the wording in the amendment of the official plan and the zoning would state that there is no permanent disposal of waste at this site. So I already touched on sort of the rezoning. The amendment to the bylaw would change the zoning from agriculture, at least of that portion of the site with the facility, and instead provide an exception to permit this waste disposal facility. Again, that term waste disposal, using the term of the official plan, but not disposal on site, but because that term includes the handling of waste, which this site is all about. The other thing the amendments can do is more precisely define what the uses are that are permitted. And Brian went over, the organics processing, materials management, potential future materials recovery, and the ancillary uses such as the maintenance. The other thing that the bylaw can accomplish is, again, provide restrictions on the area to be used for that, and that can be done, again, through mapping and or yard provisions and setbacks from property boundaries. As the chair said at the outset, this is a public meeting process dealing with the township's official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. Some purposes in that, and it's prescribed under the Planning Act, and the clerk mentioned the sections, provide you the opportunity for comments, questions, so there's better understanding of the project. For staff, both of the county, the township, and staff of GHD to hear your comments. And worth pointing out, the last bullet, all comments are being provided to both respective councils. As mentioned, the consultants will take away comments that are received and review them, and there's already material. I know I received an email on Friday with a number of comments to look at. I just point out there's a range of disciplines involved in the consulting team and on your own staff, and so a lot of different things to be looked at by different people. As well, I mentioned the agencies such as the Conservation Authority is also looking at all of the material that's being submitted. In terms of the approval, the county official plan requires approval by the province, and council here has to consider both the county and township amendments, and that's going to occur at a future date. And I'd be speaking out of turn if I said I knew when that might be. I think there's a lot of information to review yet before there's any opportunity to come back to council with a recommendation. Next steps, planning approvals, which is the step that we're at now, and the public information process, public meeting process. Goes on to talk about procurement of contracts, design, permitting and approvals, which is a site plan, building permit I'd already mentioned, going into operation. But, of course, without the planning approvals, none of that happens. So we're at the very first bullet up there, and that needs to be navigated successfully in order for any of those other bullets to take place. In summary then, before we turn it over, Brian mentioned the Resource Recovery Center aligns with the county's solid waste strategy, and he stated a couple reasons why that is. The comprehensive siting process, he touched on that. There are 502 sites considered initially, and that was narrowed down through 3 major screening processes. There's been a lot of detailed work done to date, studies on the site, engineering, traffic, environment. But again, based on input, there may be a need to revisit some aspects of any or all of those. And again, there'll be continued stakeholder and public consultation through the process, and the ability, I believe, online, and that's the important thing at the bottom, on the website, to keep track of information here. And Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if the township has a similar website in parallel. And the chairman's verified that as well, that the Springwater Township website would have the same. And with that, Mr. Chair, I turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. All right, so members of the public will now have the opportunity to pose questions and/or make comments. As we've said tonight, you won't get answers tonight, but it's very important to pose your questions, state your opinions, and these will be carefully considered, as they have been already. The written comments we've received thus far were posted up to date on the website as of today, so they're all available on the website to review, and this will form very important input for future reporting by the planning department, which will come to council for review. So please line up behind the microphone. Ensure that you clearly state your name and address for the clerk. And then after everybody has had a chance, anybody who desires has had a chance to come up and speak, then we will go to council members for any comments and questions. Okay? So who would like to first approach? Thank you.
Just have a few questions. I thought I heard you, I'm Mary Taylor, sorry.
Let me just make sure the mic, stand close to the mic there. And
Hello, there it is. I'm Mary Taylor, and I forget what the other requirement was.
Address.
Address, 17 Josephine Street, Prince Albert, Ontario. I thought I heard you say that there had been no environmental assessments done on this property, and then I saw something about it. Was that correct?
Just to clarify, the environmental assessment process is a well-defined process by the
Yes.
Ministry of the Environment for similar projects of this nature. So that is not required, but individual sort of environmental analyses and studies have been undertaken on the site.
Okay, thank you. And you stated that it was a small area within this large area. Is that guaranteed that it's going to stay that small? Or does this amendment allow that whole property to become a waste disposal?
Nope, so we're sticking to that footprint, with the exception of the existing trail network that's on the
Yes.
site. We're going to use that for the access roads, but everything will be bound by those limits as we've shown. If we were to expand on that in the future, we would have to go through the same process again.
But it would be easier because you've already got the zoning changed.
Well, so
Is
I was
that
just going to
correct?
follow up. No, the zoning will apply just to that footprint within the site. The remainder of the site will stay with the zoning as is.
All right.
So if we were to change any of that, we would have to go through a similar process.
Okay. The pond for the storm water runoff, is it lined?
It will be lined, yes.
And it's lined because of rainwater washing down on some of this recyclable material, is that correct? Which could be poisonous to the groundwater? Is that,
The materials will be maintained inside of buildings to minimize that. I mean, so
Yes.
any of the runoff that comes from within the property will be directed to that stormwater pond. And as part of that ECA, or the environmental compliance approval, which will be established in negotiation with the Ministry of the Environment, will have strict regulations in terms of quantity and quantity that need to be met before anything can be released from the site. In addition to that, we're also looking to reuse as much water as we can for fire protection, for example, or other processed water on site for organics, things of that nature. So.
all right, and the odor and sound. I live near a dump, and when I passed it about, I think it was about a mile away, the wind was blowing and I could smell it in my car. And ours is not a waste, it's similar to yours. It's recycling, and it gets picked up and goes away. So that's one thing that I think you really need to think about, because the smell is there, all right? The runoff concerns me because I'm quite close to you, and we have swamp, and we provide a corridor for animals, land and aquatic, and we're trying to keep that nice and clean and tidy, and you could be contaminating, if it's not well taken care of, a groundwater that everybody around here uses. And that was one thing I wanted to say.
Okay,
And
can I just pause? If anybody
Yes.
else, it's probably best to have 1 or 2 or 3 people who do want to make a comment, come up and line up behind, so I have an idea of how many people want to make a comment, so I can control the
Yes.
time. And if you have more questions, then just go to the back of the line and
will.
just pose them, okay?
come on.
Thank you very much.
Yes, my name's Heather Rutherford. I live at 1484 Floss Road 3 East in Springwater Township, and I have 2 things I would like to do. I'll do the first one, and then I'll move to the back of the row. And the first one is a letter from Mary Wagner on behalf of Friends of Simcoe Forest, and I'll try to present it for you. Mary Wagner is a resident of Springwater Township, and she's also the president of the citizens group, Friends of Simcoe Forest Incorporated. So these are her words. Springwater Council is considering an amendment to its official plan and rezoning to accommodate the county's choice of site of an environmental resource recovery center in an agricultural and residential area. This is the reason the official plan, there is a reason that the official plan does not presently allow this. I and approximately 200 members are concerned with the apparent shift in county values away from the great works of Deputy Minister Edmund Zavitz and Premier Ernest Drury. When Simcoe County named one of its forests the E.C. Drury County Forest in recognition of his efforts in reforestation, he is quoted in saying, "I would rather have this for my monument than a statue in Queen's Park or on University Avenue." How proud he was of his legacy, a legacy for his children, his grandchildren, and great-grandchildren that can claim as their heritage. My husband, as a child, roamed and remembers many adventures in the frail forest. Many of the members of Friends of Simcoe County recall venturing into this forest and spending hours at playing with salamanders, frogs, and snakes, holding their breath when they caught sight of a doe and fawn. We now have a grandson. Our plans of teaching him the wonders of the woods in Simcoe County is now more than ever in jeopardy. What a legacy of council's predecessors, those men who saw a wasteland of sand, floods, and fires. They experimented until they found the right trees to restore the land. They did restore this land, and to one that no longer allowed flooding, that invited wildlife and provided foraging grounds for citizens in search of foods such as ferns, leeks, and mushrooms. Springwater Township has the greatest number of forests in the county. Could it be that it was also the leading township for wasteland and required the most help to restore her healthy forests? Shall Springwater be a constant risk for site selection for the next project? Springwater could be asked to provide another industrial site in their forest. Has that possibility been discussed? What legacy will council claim today? Will you allow your children and grandchildren to witness you vote away their future lands of natural heritage and wildlife habitat, their playgrounds for catching tadpoles and watching the salamander dances? This is a slippery slope. No other place in Canada has placed a materials recovery facility, materials management facility, organics processing plant, truck maintenance, and parking garage in the middle of a forest less than 150 meters from people's homes. The most land-pressured cities in southern Ontario have respected setbacks of no less than 300 meters for these facilities, and they are not placed in residential areas. The noise and odor allowances within the industrial city sites are the home to similar facilities cannot apply to our quiet, fresh air forests. Citizens that attend the visits to these sites come back indicating that they're needing earmuffs to protect them from the noise the fans provided for the negative pressure within these facilities. Staff at the visited facilities stated that fires were a common, if not a daily occurrence. Springwater Council, you have options to site this on an industrial site and reject this rezoning and official plan amendment. Is the cost of industrial land too great? What is the dollar value to bring the services and roads through a forest? What is the cost to flatten the significantly rolling topography of this facility footprint? What is the cost of destroying the water recharge area that is presently providing water to all the citizens on private wells? Why do we not seem to matter? Friends of Simcoe Forests Incorporated has provided council and staff with peer reviews to the planning process and site selection, as well as the environmental impact study for the Freel Tract. Please take time to read these documents. I also would suggest reading the county's own forest management plan. We, the Friends of Simcoe County, applaud the green initiative of Simcoe County to take ownership of the waste produced by our citizens. We, the Friends of Simcoe County, oppose the siting of an environmental resource recovery center in a forest. And that's Mary Wagner, President, Friends of Simcoe County Forests Incorporated, 2928 Horseshoe Valley Road, Springwater Township. It's for public record.
Thank you, Ms. Rutherford. Thank you. Thank you. And you had further comments, so if you go to the back of the line, we'll look forward to those. Thank you.
Hi, I too have prepared a letter. Cindy Mercer, 1601 Rainbow Valley Road East, Phelpston. Thank you, Deputy Allen and members of council. I appreciate this opportunity to speak today. As some of you may know, I play a very active role in the Friends of Simcoe Forests. We actively work to protect and preserve our county forests. I believe with all my heart in the principles that initiated the formation of this group and the values that continue to strengthen us. Today, however, I must come forward and state my position from a more personal standpoint on behalf of my family. My family home is immediately next to the Freel Forest. In fact, our forest property is only one component of a much larger forest consisting of privately owned lands as well as the county-owned Freel Tract. Since starting to jot down my thoughts on what I would say here today, there have been 2 more major fire outbreaks at recycling facilities in this country alone. These are only the incidents that we hear about through media. Numerous recycling facilities must contend with fires on a regular basis. These facilities have fire safety devices in place and are located in industrial areas better equipped to handle emergencies, unlike a natural corridor. This township witnessed a facility smaller than the ERRC proposed for the Freel Forest burned to the ground in 2014. Our family is one of several families that reside on a narrow dirt and gravel dead-end road. This is the only access route our families have to reach our homes. In addition, we must travel past the proposed ERRC site and its emergency entrance onto this rugged dead-end road should it ever become necessary to evacuate the area. A fire would only have to travel a short distance before trapping multiple families in a densely forested area. There are multiple dead-end roads in the immediate area of the Freel Forest. Nowhere does there appear to be any type of emergency response plan addressing evacuation routes for residents whose families and properties will needlessly be put at great risk. Should this high-risk facility be built in the Freel Forest, and should a disaster occur, I suspect families will hold the Township of Springwater and the County of Simcoe fully responsible for their negligence. Both the Township and the County official plans enforce strict governance. which applies to the frail forest the same as it applies to the surrounding properties in the area. Our family applied for family severance on our 100-acre property immediately next door to the frail forest. Working on behalf, we had a team of professionals, including a planner, environmental consulting firm, and a lawyer. We took an environmental approach and offered to subject 97% of our property to environmental protection zoning plus a conservation easement under the Conservation Land Act. We faced opposition from both the Township of Springwater and the County of Simcoe. Despite the OMB's sympathetic comments towards our efforts and those of the NVCA in attempting to devise an environmental dimension to the project, our case was dismissed because it did not meet the township official plan. The County of Simcoe's proposed ERRC in the frail forest does not meet the township's official plan, nor does it meet the county's own official plan. I fail to understand how a county that successfully fought and dismissed the proposal put forth on behalf of our family can conceivably devise a plan to develop in the very forest next door a mega waste management facility. The county appears to have little desire to abide by the same rules and regulations enforced by them on the general public. It is my understanding that new provincial policies coming into effect have been designed to, among other things, offer increased protection to our natural heritage, groundwater recharge areas, and provincial mapping on an agricultural system, all of which it appears the county will have to contend with should they continue to pursue the frail forest and build the ERRC. It is my understanding that property owners are encouraged to preserve and protect our forests and agriculture. The County of Simcoe should be leading by example. As owners of a private forest, we see little to no value in looking to the county for guidance, as we cannot think of a worse example of forest management than defacing an interior forest of a significant woodlot with significant wildlife for waste management purposes. The future appears to be heading in a direction that will give lower-tier municipalities more say into land use planning in their own communities. It is our hope that Springwater Council will recognize the urgency for a positive leadership role when it comes to beneficial land use practices in our community and the protection and preservation of our natural heritage. My family is strongly opposed to both the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw. We urge Township Council not to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mercer. And if you have any further points, feel free to present them at the end of the line there once you get forward. Thank you. Hello.
Hi, Karen Smith, 29 Lawrence Avenue in Anton Mills. Honorable Deputy Mayor, members of council, I wish to thank you for the opportunity to express my concerns regarding the proposed Resource Recovery Center at 2976 Horseshoe Valley Road, otherwise known as Site C-136.
Can I ask you just come a little closer to the mic because you're not projecting quite.
Sorry, I do have a
There
soft
we go.
voice.
There we go.
I expect you will have received and read County Staff Report CCW 17-174. It clearly rings a warning bell regarding the cost and viability of this project. The potential impact of the Provincial Growth Plan 2017 and Bill 151 Waste-Free Ontario Act are unknown and are very likely to both cost the taxpayers of Simcoe County significantly more and may result in the county having to relinquish control of the facility to the private sector. Clearly, this will not benefit the taxpayer, as we will have paid for the facility but reap none of the financial rewards. At best, the project is premature, and for these reasons alone should not move forward at this time. The concerns regarding fire control are very real, as demonstrated by the news of the two recent severe fires at recycling facilities in Canada. Toronto's Cherry Street plant on May 25th and Delta, British Columbia on May 28th, and a major fire at Wasteco in Hamilton in October of 16. On the day I visited the Guelph facility, the staff stated the facility there had experienced 5 fires in that week alone. To place a facility such as this in a forested area is, in my opinion, reckless to the point of criminal negligence. In addition, the cost to the Township of Springwater taxpayers to upgrade the fire department to legislated standards for this type of facility would be very prohibitive. Right now, residents are being brought to their knees in Hamilton and other communities by the odor of composting facilities. This is indicative of the monumental obstacles that have yet to be overcome to make such a facility acceptable where people live and conduct business. My 3 main concerns, however, seem to have been largely ignored or dismissed. First, due to there being no sewer access, the necessity of building a retention pond to contain the organic liquid runoff, organics being approximately 90% water, is extremely worrisome. Should trucks be used to take this material away, it would require the carbon footprint saved by building the facility in Simcoe County. It would just negate it. In addition, retention ponds are notoriously expensive to maintain. The contaminated water from this proposed facility would very likely be released into the environment during periods of excessive rainfall. This week's tornado warnings with the torrential downpours, and we're all aware that this is a frequent occurrence during the spring, summer, and fall in this area. There is swampland on this property, and the Matheson Creek runs very close by. No amount of engineering will prevent runoff from eventually entering the environment. Secondly, the curing process is normally done outdoors. This process takes from 6 months to a year. The sheer volume of waste from Simcoe County, possibly Orillia and Barrie, would require a building in size that is beyond my imagination. To say this process would take place indoors is disingenuous, to say the least. I question the person in charge of the facility that handles much of Toronto's waste as to whether all pathogens would be destroyed during the original process, and the answer was no, they would not. In addition, if the piles are not handled properly, pathogens will increase. I would assume that pits would be used, but this will not prevent odor, flies, and other unwanted results, and when the pits become full of water, again, runoff into the environment is a possibility. We must remember that this is a recharge area for the water in our area. Thirdly, there are at least 4 sites in Alliston alone that are contaminated due to there having been garages at those sites. Where there are garages, there is contamination into the ground. This will happen no matter how carefully things are done. Gasoline and oil spills are only 2 of the many contaminants. There are many other contaminants such as paint thinners, cleaning materials, toluene. To place a garage in such a pristine environment is unimaginable. When contaminations enter the ground, they will eventually make their way to the water table and the aquifer. This may take years, but it will happen. Honorable Mayor, Deputy Mayor, I should say, members of council, Springwater Township boasts water so clean that is used by scientists worldwide as the gold standard to test other water. Will you be a party to the possibility of contaminating this water for the sake of convenience or because it is more important to recover some earth and fertilizer from organics than it is to save forests and the purity of our water? Some farmers have told me that they will not even allow the fertilizers on their land that result from this process. The dictionary defines the word organics as any chemical compound containing carbon, like or derived from living organisms. Soil diapers, adult incontinence pads, and used feminine products are not organics. The general public thinks of the word organics as the vegetables and meat they throw into their green bin. A facility such as this handles much more unsavory materials. We are not fooled by the word organics. I would also like to point out that you cannot replace forest by buying more forest. Because forest comes under the control of Simcoe County does not make it new forest. New forest is when land that has been previously used for other purposes is planted with trees. As to the materials recovery portion, recyclables that are contaminated cannot be used. Many recyclables end up in landfills despite the valiant efforts to reduce, reuse, and recycle. Markets fluctuate where recyclables are concerned, and when the markets are down, the demand is down. Recoverables then sit in a pile waiting for an uptick in the market. There will be times when piles of recyclables will be held at this site. This attracts rats, mice, flies, and other undesirables. It is also a hazard to wildlife and a source of contamination. I will not address the many other concerns that I have, as they have been brought forward many times by the citizens of Simcoe County and the Friends of Simcoe Forest. Please know that I am an avid fan of recycling and composting. But I believe provincial legislation to make manufacturers responsible for excessive and non-recyclable packaging can be a far more productive way to stop unnecessary waste. I think the province is on the right track this time. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Hello.
Hi, Linda Van Kasteren, 3088 Horseshoe Valley Road West. Mr. Chair and Council, thank you. I am going to skip over the parts that everybody else has spoken to and just deal with things that have not yet been spoken to. My husband Nick and I own the 2 properties immediately west of the proposed waste management facility. We object to the proposed official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw on the grounds that the proposed waste management facility is clearly a large Class 2 industrial use and should be located within an industrial area on lands designated for industrial uses. It is also our position that the environmental impact of the proposed facility on this significant woodlot within the Greenlands designation has been grossly underestimated. We are also of the opinion that the environmental, social, cultural, and economic impact on ourselves, our family, our properties, and the neighborhood at large has also been underestimated. The precedent set by allowing this type of amendment and change to the zoning bylaw within our beautiful township puts all of the county land holdings, many of which have been acquired through gifts and donations from taxpayers, at the risk of being developed. Minimum distance setbacks are required for all buildings in our community. How are these setbacks applied to this proposed facility? How do they differ in rules from agricultural and other buildings? In 2001, we were denied the opportunity by this very township to rezone any of our agriculturally classed properties to allow for our on-farm market selling agriculturally produced products. How can Simcoe County Forests be considered for rezoning to allow industrial uses? We urge Township Council not to support this application, and we ask that this matter be sent back to the county with recommendations that it find a more suitable industrial site. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Deputy Mayor and Council, Heather Rutherford, 1484 Floss Road 3 East. In my little thing I'm going to be reading forward are questions, but I'm going to read them all because some of them are related and perhaps they could be answered together rather than individually, if that's all right. Okay. With the nature of this industry, there is significant occurrence of and concern as fires as witnessed by Springwater May 2013 BFI total loss of materials handling facility, and more recently, the huge outbreak at the materials handling facility in Toronto beside Lake Ontario. Both of these facilities were located in an industrial area. The proposed facility in Horseshoe Valley must go through a rezoning and official plan amendment since it is not located in an industrial area, but in a vibrant, flourishing forest with its own fire load associated with the forest. This plot of land is part of a wildlife corridor that stretches from the northern region in Springwater to the south that is heavily wooded properties associated with woodland corridors. The property directly to the north is Little Craighurst wetland, which is evaluated by the MNR as a significant wetland. Should a fire occur on this facility, the consequences could be devastating. The property is within 1 mile of 4 dead-end roads. The northern entrance to the property intersects with Rainbow Valley Road East, which further intersects with Baseline Road. To the north is Floss Road 3 East, which is in direct line with the property. To the south is Fox Farm Road, in which a subdivision depends on exiting this road. It was noted that on maps distributed to some council members that the dead ends were not delineated properly and appear to have extensions off them. These were in fact unserviced road allowances, snowmobile trails, all unsuitable to be used as exits in an emergency. Should a fire occur in the facility and the forest was to catch fire, residents would be trapped without access to exit. Will the county explain what type of emergency preparations they have considered to ensure the safety of the residents on the dead-end locations? Will there be water mains brought down the roads to facilitate minimum mobility to fight fires? Has it been considered to upgrade the access to exits on dead-end portions of the roads by opening road allowances and extending the road system to accommodate evacuations of residents who will be trapped? If any of these measures have been considered, how will it be financed? Will it be by who, the county or Springwater? Who will be responsible to maintain these roads should they be built, and the water mains in the future? During the public meetings, compensation was discussed with the residents. The discussion should be on our public record. To date, despite being queried on the type of compensation, the county has remained silent with the affected landowners and has not approached any that I am aware of to date. Is it the intent of the county to wait for all the approvals to go forward before addressing the type of compensation that the property, business, farm owners can expect? What parameters would be looked at? And would there be an adjudicator to handle differences in perceived losses? Who would compensate the residents, the county or the municipality if they agree to move forward? The county has not discussed any mitigation measures that they propose, be it the smell, the traffic, sound, water quality, site appearance, risk, just to mention a few. When will the county come forward with a clear picture of what they intend to do to make this a friendly environment for the community it represents? This leads into the requirements of the provincial policy, PPS. As you're aware, when municipalities make a decision on a planning matter, it shall be consistent with the PPS in effect and shall conform with provincial plans. It is the policy of the provincial PPS that, and these are quoted, healthy, livable, and safe communities are sustained by avoiding development and land use patterns which may cause environment or public health or safety concerns. End of quote. New quote. Major facilities and sensitive land uses shall be planned to ensure they are appropriately designed, buffered, and or separated from each other to prevent or mitigate adverse effects from odor, noise, and other contaminants, minimize risk to the public health and safety, and to ensure the long-term viability of major facilities. End of quote. From this point, D6 guidelines come into effect, and many OMB cases have used the D series as a basis for their decisions. With all the new legislation updates to the Growth Plan 2017 and the Waste-Free Ontario Act, why doesn't the county put on hold progressing the ERRC planning until the rules and regulation details of the new legislation are clear and the impact of these is better known? And finally, an excerpt from the report CCW 17-174, and that was the county's report. Quote, in consideration of local municipal informal comments on this project and the input received from some members of the public, an appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board, OMB, is likely regardless of the outcome. This could significantly impact the project's timelines, potentially resulting in a lengthy delay in project development. It should also be noted that the province has very recently released an outline of proposed changes to the land use planning appeal system in Ontario. It is not possible to confirm how these proposed changes could impact the project until the associated legislation is published and reviewed by the county's legal counsel. End of quote. With all of these changes discussed and the negatives expressed by many parties, is it not incumbent for County Council to reflect and consider that decisions made to this point about location and timing might be wrong, and that they should pause and reconsider these for such a costly exercise on so many fronts? Given the uncertainty that decisions to date are still the best ones at a cost of $1 million so far, is it a good basis for future decisions which need to be made regarding this project? Needless to say, I object to the rezoning and official plan amendment of 2976 Horseshoe Valley Road, known as Friel Track. In my opinion, it's bad planning, it's bad use of heritage and resource, it's also bad for all of us, the citizens of Springwater. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Although we said we aren't going to answer these, I'm just going to give GHD, I know they've been madly writing points out, but after everybody has had a chance to pose their questions, I will go to GHD and just see whether you have any general comments with what you're hearing tonight. I'll then go to staff, because we want to hear their input, and then we'll go to council. So, Ms. Mercer.
Cindy Mercer, 1601 Rainbow Valley Road East, Phelpston. And I have a question in regards to the county staff report, CCW 17-174, dated June 13, 2017. An excerpt under the planning section included, quote, technical comments received from the MOECC may be challenging for the county to navigate at this stage, as they appear to require a level of detail normally reserved for the environmental compliance approval stage or license to operate issued by the MOECC, which is not only technology specific but considers the vendor's application of that technology. Staff and consultants continue to meet with the MOECC to try to outline a more constructive and achievable path forward, end of quote. So my question in regards to that is, why is the county so out of sync with the MOECC with respect to the details they want to know that aren't available at this stage? And my second question in regards to that same is, what was quoted, what is the more constructive and achievable path? What does that refer to?
Okay, thank you. So we'll wait till all the questions of this. The next two gentlemen have questions, and we'll just pause for some comment and invite anybody else who wants to come forward and make any further comment. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. My name is John Rumney, 9 Maltman Court in Phelpston, Ontario. I moved to Phelpston, Ontario almost 4 years ago. Bad timing, I guess, after all this. I've been listening to comments. I spoke to the engineers at a couple of the events that went on early, was mentioned that we can fix anything through engineering. I can't understand some of the comments that were made as far as the site selection process. They said 500 sites. It was one engineering firm who went through all the things. This was the fight of least resistance because there are only a handful of people close by. I think if everybody really knew that around surrounding areas in Barrie and whatnot, they would be a little bit more upset. There would be more opposition to this plan. Most people don't realize. I came from the city. We put this in an industrial area. So be it. There's no homes around it. But I have a question for us. Sorry, is it GDH? Yeah, sorry. I have one question. You moved the site forward. Did you contact any of the people within the 500-meter range because now it's moved forward? I don't believe you did. Another question is for the fire department. Maybe this is Deputy Mayor's could answer this. Who's responsible? Is it Springwater or is it Simcoe County to put a plan in place to protect the area?
We'll take that question, as I say, and then we're going to pause
Okay, that was the-
for general
sorry.
comments from GHD.
I'm
No,
almost-
I appreciate your question, so that's being noted. So
Okay, good.
go ahead with your other question.
And then just like I say, the one for you, and I just want to say that it just does not make sense. I talked to the engineers. They said they did a bus tour but did not go into the forest when they selected it. They have no idea how dry that was in August. And I know, councillors, you're bored with this because you've probably never been in it either. But when it's dry, that thing would go up like, a tinderbox. And you've seen wildfires. Does the county have fire facilities like from the air? Another question. Yeah, because M&R, will they be able to respond to something? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we've got the point with respect to the fire, so we'll address that.
And will engineering solve all the problems? That was my other question. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Do you want to take a break, or do you want me to go ahead?
You go ahead.
All right. Ed Kreitcher, 1286 Rainbow Valley Road East. I'm here with my wife Scarlett, and just for the record, we oppose this amendment. I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the public notice for tonight's meeting, for the public meeting. And I have a copy of it here, and if I just can skip to the zoning bylaw amendment purpose and effect. And it talks about the effect. The effect would permit an environmental resource recovery center, an ERRC, which will house a materials management facility, MMF, an organics processing facility, OPF, and associated ancillary facilities, and it talks about minimum front, rear, and side setbacks. And I want to refer back to 5 weeks ago when the county of Simcoe had their public meeting on May the 9th. And they sent out a letter, and in their letter, they identified the effect as exactly as the townships, except they added a potential future materials recovery facility in their public notice. And I'm wondering why the township doesn't have it identified in their notice for public comment today. And this whole area of a potential future materials recovery facility causes me great concern because we don't have enough information on it. Back in 2010, in a report titled Solid Waste Management Strategy, County of Simcoe, prepared by Stantec Consulting Limited, on behalf of Simcoe County, on page 28, it states a Simcoe-only MRF would require a building of about 51,000 square feet. And if you include Barrie and Aurelia, you would need a 65,600 square foot MRF building. A representative site, and it continues, a representative site of about 15 to 20 hectares would be required to accommodate a standalone MRF facility, allowing sufficient space for employee and guest parking, vehicle roadways, weigh scales, scale house, sufficient vehicle queuing, and scales. Now, by my calculations, 15 to 20 hectares is 37 to 49 acres, which is at least 3 to 4 times larger than the 4 hectares or 11 acres that the county's present consultants are proposing. My question is, why is there such a large difference in the amount of land required for the MRF identified by the first consultant, Stantec, to the county compared to the present day GHD consultants? Additionally, the same 2010 report identifies that the MRF would require 12 to 16 employees to work the various sorting machines, and based on the projected growth of Simcoe County's recyclables, it would be reasonable to consider an MRF size to accommodate 50,000 tons of recyclables per year processed over 2 shifts. And the report also says if Barrie and Orillia were to be considered in the MRF design, total design capacity would grow to 70 to 75,000 tons per year. My question is, when Barrie and Orillia begin using the MRF, would this then require more employees for 3 shifts, essentially working the machinery 24 hours a day? This whole potential future materials recovery facility has not been properly disclosed to the public, and therefore I don't see how the county can include it in any way in the effect of their recent official plan amendment announcement, whereas the township didn't even include it in their public announcement. I'd just like to know why or how the township would not include it. Has the township clarified with the county what MRF considerations and requirements are presently incorporated into their present plans, like the pond size for the discharge of the water? Does the township know enough about the potential future MRF to take a position on it presently today? This is where the slippery slope starts. They want us to rezone this. They're not telling us what the MRF is going to look like, and we're supposed to move ahead. We can't. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Yes,
I'm his wife,
welcome.
as he already stated. The only question
Can you move
that
a little
I have-
closer to the mic, please?
Sorry, the only question that I have, and it's just been, was brought out in the fire...
Name and address,
Oh,
please.
sorry, Mrs. Kracher, 1286 Rainbow Valley Road East.
Thank you.
And the question that I have is about the runoff ponds that are going to be lined. So if I understand correctly, you're talking about using that contaminated water for fire suppression? So that would be my first comment or question. Is that part of your fire suppression plan? And my second one, as far as fire department goes and egress and access routes, the County of Simcoe, during some of the public consultations, had indicated that they would not be using Rainbow Valley Road East as an access or egress point for this site. Yet, throughout the winter, all of the county vehicles and the test vehicles were parked on Rainbow Valley Road East, sometimes right in the middle of the road, so we had to drive around. So my question would be is if the township is going to allow this in any way, would the county please define what they consider to be emergency vehicles? And would that consist of police, fire, and ambulance emergency vehicles? And what we don't see is in any of these reports or traffic studies is long weekend traffic, where the roads are completely clogged on Horseshoe Valley Road during long weekends. What we don't see is pictures that I've taken on my cell phone on the way to work of tractor trailers, cars, and everything stuck at the bottom of all of these hills trying to get up and down these roads. I appreciate that you're looking at modifying some of these roads. However, it also means on the same mornings on Rainbow Valley Road East, when we're snowed in because the plows can't get to us because of the heavy snow load, is that where you're proposing that the emergency vehicles would be coming into the site? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I guess I'll make some comments here. Robin Enslin, 3842 Horseshoe or 3826 Horseshoe. As for the fire, we've had 3 fires in this township that we all know of. We had Maximum Disposal, which I was command of until Tony finally got there. We had BFI, and we also had Phillips. We're going to need some good apparatus, We're gonna have to spend a lot of money on that as the fire plan. I know our new fire chief is working on it. But I don't believe we're gonna be paying for it as Springwater. We're gonna need a platform truck. We're gonna need definitely water. We're gonna need it is a forest and it is a dry area at times. Yes, fires do happen, not hopefully with training, but there's gonna be training costs, there's gonna be all kinds of other costs associated with that, which the county should have to pay for. We'll go with the roads. I live on Horseshoe. Long weekend's perfect. I have a heck of a time responding to emergency calls now, even in an apparatus due to traffic. Also, we have an issue with winter maintenance on that road. It is not well maintained at all at this present time. And that will be improved, obviously, but I want to see these things done before we actually start proceeding with another facility in a forestry area. We have also areas in this township that are zoned for industrial that we're not looking at because they were private, like an ex gravel yard, gravel pit. And there's some better planning ideas out there. Anyhow, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Hello.
Hang on. I will be, oh, sorry, Mark Lawson, 1098 Rainbow Valley Road East. I won't be quite as elegant as the ladies before me, but they've covered a lot of the topics already. I just want to start with showing this beautiful bag from the county of Simcoe. Look at the little kid fishing and the frog and everything. I feel if they go ahead with this site and this proposal at this site, we'll be able to hand out a bag to show the kid fishing with a net, picking up the dead fish floating in the creek down the road. The frog will be mushed on the road from the tractor trailers going through the forested areas, etc.
So Mark, we look
But
forward to your question here.
It's for the greater, it's for the greater good, okay? Now, all their site plan, their footprint shows this red dot in the middle of the fields. That's fine. They're talking they're gonna try to use the trail going through it to the roadway for the trucks to get in and out. Well, I've been in construction a long time, and it's not gonna be going in through that little trail. It'll be for tractor trailers coming in and out, what's it gonna be? 30 feet wide, whatever, for heavy trucks, etc. That's, the footprint's there, that's what's the road gonna be, a half a kilometer long. The trail's gonna have to be moved away. That's a kilometer long, basically. So there's gonna be a lot more footprint than what they're showing us here. I know you brought up before the business plan. They keep telling us it's the right thing to do, et cetera, et cetera. We've asked, you've asked, the township's asked numerous times, what are we looking at? Like, I mean, anybody with any brain knows that's the most expensive site to put it on is in a forested area. We're surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of acres of forest. Now you gotta redo Horseshoe Valley Road over, everything, the stormwater retention. I don't know how they're gonna get the water that's running down the road, how they're gonna get it back up to the stormwater retention ponds, but that's good. They're talking about all kinds of 10 highly skilled jobs, et cetera. Like, I mean, we're gonna be on the, there's gonna be more people on the sunshine list, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just getting tired of municipalities trying to do the better good. So we're gonna save, 13 million over 20 years, but it's gonna cost us 100 million to save us a 13. It's just, that's they're getting their math by the liberals, I guess, whatever. But no, that's my concern is the footprint. They're not showing us the honest footprint of it. And the business plan, like, I mean, what's it, they have no idea. They say it could be 6, could be 35. Well, I've been in construction my whole life working on municipal projects, and they've never come in on budget. It's either 50 to 100% over budget, so good luck with this one. Totally wrong site to have it on, but.
Okay, thank you for your comments and questions.
So I had John Rumney, 9 Maltman Court,
Thank you.
Phelpston, Ontario. I have one question. Is there anyone here who thinks this site would be a great idea? Raise your hand. The question is that you are the town of Springwater. Do you see a trend running here? Is there anybody that's for this in the entire Springwater County?
Springwater Township in
Springwater
Simcoe
Township,
County?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Like I said, I'm new.
Well, I can't answer that question right now, but I take your
But-
point.
I'm just trying to state the obvious for all of you here. that-
Thank you.
He's doing it for the record.
Thank you.
For the record,
Karen Smith, 29 Lawrence Avenue, same as last time. I just want to make one point. Throughout this process, there had been mentioned the fact that this would create jobs. And I asked the people over at Guelph, where they have a materials recovery system, about those jobs. And they told me that the jobs are minimum wage jobs, and that the period that most people stayed in those jobs is from 3 to 6 months, because the jobs were so highly unattractive, required full gear, personal protective equipment. And so that's the type of jobs we're looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so although we're not expecting fulsome answers at this time, just turn it to GHD to see whether they have any initial comment on the points raised this evening. And I don't want to get into a to and fro, but just provide you with the opportunity for general comment on the points before we turn to staff and then to council. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I took some notes here, so I apologize. I think I've got all the questions, but feel free to come back up. I'm happy to answer. So to the point about meetings with the MOE, we've been meeting with the MOE as well as other stakeholders such as NVCA throughout this process. So they continue to raise comments and we address those. It is an iterative process. So to the latest round of MOE comments, they were with respect to the air modeling that was performed in terms of the odor. We met with them last Monday and we have successfully resolved that, or we have a plan in place currently to do so. So we need to provide them with more information, but we have had a meeting with them. In terms of fire protection, I understand there's a lot of concerns there. They will certainly be addressed going forward. We have a meeting with the fire chief this Thursday coming up. So again, we're trying to get ahead of this in the process. We haven't designed the facility. We don't know a lot of details of it. But to sort of feed into that process and make sure that everyone has their chance for input, we want to have these meetings as we go through that process. The relocation of the footprint in terms of consulting with the neighbors. So it was relocated to avoid the archaeological find as well as to get further away from the wetlands in the corner. So that certainly moved it further away from some sensitive receptors, but closer to others. And what I can say is that those residents have been informed throughout this process through various means, including meetings such as tonight, as well as individual mailings to them. With respect to the site size, in terms of conclusions that were made in previous consultant reports, I'm assuming that reflects the entire site. So this site is 84 hectares and we're only using 4.5 hectares of that footprint. So a lot of the size, I believe, comes from including the on-site area as buffer. So we've accounted for 380 meters at minimum currently from the facility footprint to the nearest sensitive receptor. The MRF facility, the materials recovery facility, has been included. It was detailed in all of the planning documents that went in support of this. It's been included on all of the maps. It's been presented as part of these meetings, so that has been included in this process throughout. Using runoff for fire protection. Again, I mentioned earlier that the water that enters those ponds needs to be controlled for both quantity and quality. So certainly potentially using that for fire protection water is something we need to look at, and making sure that that is clean or clean enough water for serving that purpose will certainly be part of those conversations. Emergency access, the main access to the facility will be coming off of Horseshoe Valley Road. The existing trail that connects to Rainbow Valley in the north will be maintained for I suppose, alternate access is a better use of the term. So all of the facility trucks using the facility will come from Horseshoe Valley. Also emergency vehicles, that will be the primary access route. However, if for whatever reason that is not possible, then there is an alternate from Rainbow Valley Road in the north. And certainly in terms of turning radii and access for all of those types of vehicles, they will be included in the evaluation. To the width of the road, that's been identified in the reports as well. We're going to follow the alignment of the existing trail through the property where we can to minimize any further tree removals, but there will be a slight jog as it connects to Horseshoe Valley Road to improve sight lines and things like that. The width of the road will be 2 to 3 lanes depending on where it is to accommodate trucks, and with the inclusion of a utility corridor and a drainage ditch out to Horseshoe Valley, that'll be in the neighborhood of 20 meters. And that was also identified in the facility characteristics report.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So if there are more questions, start to file up to the front, and while that's happening, before we turn to councillors, through CAO Brinley, possibly staff might have any comments or would like to share with us at this point.
Well, thank you, Deputy Mayor. At this point, staff will not be answering any questions. Just so you know, the process is the county submits what we call a full application. It's at that point that we start actually analyzing it. Part of that analysis is the meeting that we have today, and there was a lot of wonderful questions that came from the community. We have a lot of our own questions, and at the same time, council, not just through this meeting, but through a number of engagements we're going to have lots of questions going forward. So by all means, today isn't the only time for comments. If you have something that you want us to know about that you think of after today, please get it to us because we'd like to know. And it's still going to take quite a bit of time for us to go through the analysis, whether it's the questions that you have. We have our own that we'll be developing through this process because there's a lot of unknowns. That's the challenge we have with applications like this. There are some unknowns. And we really are going to take the time to do the analysis. And then we're going to invite everybody back again in the future. Just to add what the notification distance. Usually the Planning Act has a notification distance of about 120 meters. Our official plan requires, for this type of application, 1 kilometer. Council has asked us actually in this case to go 2 kilometers. So matter of fact, some of you who have not heard from us until today, it's because before today a lot of the consultation was done through the county. Their distances are different than what ours is. So what we've done is we've taken that net, thrown it at for 2 kilometers, and that's why we're getting a lot more people notified, a lot more people interested, and that's why maybe you haven't heard about anything until today, because our net is a lot wider. So it's really, we're going to take a lot of weight. Council, I'm going to ask the Deputy Mayor to obviously go to Council now, but our intent is to take all this away and then at a date in the future, bring this all back to all of you so you can hear the back and forth and all the answers to the questions.
Okay, thank you, CEO Brinley. So, Council, I'll start with Councillor McConaughey. Do you have any comments or questions?
I have a couple questions. The first question is I wanted to know, does the Ministry of Health or the Simcoe County Health get involved and provide comment, read noise and odor? And at what stage?
Maybe GHD could respond to that particular question, please.
The answer is no. Their concerns are addressed typically through the Ministry of the Environment.
So we won't be hearing from Simcoe County Health any comment on the odor or the noise? Like, I'm not a noise or an odor expert, and so I rely on information provided to me. So I was just wondering if we reach out to any of our experts on that. That's why I was asking the question.
We certainly could. The ministry sets regulations and guidelines based on those types of consultations. So,
the other question I have, and this would be in regards to fire, I don't know if we also involve the Fire Marshal's office to get involved for recommendations for fire suppression and contamination. We might want to look at that because I heard a lot of feedback on fire again tonight. The other comment I've heard is it belongs in an industrial site. And I don't know if any of the other 502 sites were an industrial site. I also hear from some people here saying, okay, well, you know, you have one in Springwater. Well, they were not, that was not of the chosen site. So, you know, there was some other chosen sites in Springwater. And you're saying industrial, and I heard someone say a gravel pit tonight. I have concerns because I have a feeling that that gravel pit could be the one that's in my ward. That gravel pit, no, listen to me. That gravel pit will have wastewater and water wells right near it. And it will have the largest population in Springwater right near it. So we really have to be careful when we look at industrial sites where we would be putting it. So industrial sites, I don't know if it's right or wrong. You know, I've had the county has done their work on the site, and then it comes down to preserving trees, preservation. I've heard that, protect and preserve. What I've also heard is the county has received awards for protection and preserving. So for me to argue against that they're not doing that is very difficult. But I also hear I have the Friends of the County of Simcoe County Forest. And so I'd have to look at them and say, what do you recommend for preservation and preserving? Like, if you're Friends of the County Forests, then are you raising funds to help protect other forests, or what are you doing? Are you planting trees? What's your preservation plans? So I need to understand that. Are we really looking at preservation and protection of forests together? And I believe we are. I believe the county is too, but I also agree that maybe, you know, there is some questions on the site, and we'll have to look at that. But and it's also to do with a lot of the risks. It's the fire, it's the health, the odor, and that. So we really have to look at all of the issues and get the information and then make our decision.
Thank you, Councillor McConkey. Councillor Coghlan?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Allen. Just for clarification and just to make sure that the questions were noted, the point about cost to date, typically when I am out in the community, people are often concerned that because we've invested at a county level so much money into the preferred location that no matter what the test results are, we're in too deep. From that, I would like to know how much we've invested to date. So, you know, I hear different numbers all the time, and I would just like to be able to provide residents with a fact, an actual number to date, and also to be assured that if there is, or if there are results, that this was the preferred location, and that the amount of money gone into it isn't going to dictate if the results come back that this shouldn't be the preferred location. The other one was a resident had mentioned that when there was the finding, the site did move forward, and there was a suggestion that residents were not notified when that site moved forward. Did the site move, like the actual location of the building, move to a point where we should have notified different residents, or was it still inside that 500 meters? Just clarification on that, because if residents weren't notified, that would be, I'm trying to think of a polite word, but I have a whole bunch of questions, so if you can come back, if I can sort through them as we go through.
Councillor Coghlan. Councillor Ritchie?
Sorry. I was wondering if they could pull that map back on the, no, keep going. No. It had the spots on it. You alluded there, those yellow spots. Could you just further clarify what those are, please? The yellow spots.
Brian, GHD, please.
Sure. So the yellow spots on this map reflect sensitive receptors. So that's typically residences, but it could also be schools or hospitals or nursing homes, things of that nature. And with respect to the distance to those, you can see the black dashed line around the actual property. So that was what we used to establish who would be notified about the project and various changes. When we relocated the footprint within the overall property, it didn't change any of those boundaries.
And the little red spot, what's that identify?
That was the archaeological find, so when we had the archaeologists come out, they identified that and they did further work on it. So going forward, that's an area that will need to be protected. I understand it was the original farmhouse from when this was a farm property back in the 30s, 40s, and before that, so. But it will be protected during construction and going forward as well.
Just a couple notes here. I know myself, like last year at this time, we watched as Fort McMurray was ravaged with forest fires, and I know that is a concern with our residents, a concern with me as well too, is that proper setbacks will be put in place to mitigate any fire that does take place. So we don't have that happen here, and hopefully we learn from the mistakes that maybe we've seen out of the west. Not that they made mistakes, but I'm sure they'll be taking measures there to make sure the forest is put back or pushed back, and I hope we do the same thing as well too. So that's a concern with me. Another thing is too is the traffic. So I would be concerned that there's going to be a large number of truck traffic on a per daily basis coming in there, and that'll only grow in the future if this thing comes forward, and that the engineers make every case possible to minimize the amount of truck traffic, and I know the residents have concerns as well too, so that there's getting in and getting out, whether you double lane it, whatever the case may be, but that would, again, a concern with myself and a concern with the residents as well too, if this thing gets off the ground, that they correct those measures. So those are my concerns, Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Did you have more questions, Councillor Coghlan? And then we'll see whether we get an answer or two from the questions you've had.
Thank you. And again, I am typically just reiterating what residents said, but I want to make sure that they are noted, and that when it was referred to as a recharge station for water, groundwater, I would like to be able to make sure that we're clear on what that is and how that could impact, or if it is, please. And then the other one was the resident that brought up the either inconsistent communication or miscommunication regarding the county's public forum and ours, and just the word future. I am concerned about, because when I received our notification going out, it was proposing what I had always understood. So if there's something different about the counties, or if it's just the word future, why that happened, and what the difference is.
Thanks. I'd have to defer to the county to speak to the exact wording, but what I can say is that potentially that was an omission. I mean, the materials recovery facility has been on all of the maps. It's been notified on the public meetings we've had. It's been included in all of the reports. So, you know, that has been sort of identified throughout this process. To speak to the point about groundwater recharge, that was one of the key criteria that we looked at in consultation with residents of the county. We heard that, you know, protection of groundwater was very important to this facility, so we avoided any source protection areas, is what they're called, and that could be, you know, provincially significant wetlands. Groundwater recharge pertains specifically to the groundwater. And there are varying levels of significance with those, so we avoided the most highly significant areas. There are no wellhead protection areas or intake protection zones as well, so we've avoided all of those. With respect to traffic, I think it's important to note that regardless of this facility being established or not, the traffic you'll see and the growth over the next 40 years will happen regardless. Those trucks still need to go to the curbs to pick up this material.
If you have a question, please come and pose it.
Would you repeat yourself? I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
I was saying that the traffic associated with the trucks for this facility, whether or not this facility is in the county of Simcoe or somewhere else, those trucks will still be, you know, they're not driven by the facility. They will be increasing as time goes on, regardless of whether or not it's actually constructed. To speak to the cost, again, I'd have to defer to the county for specifics. I believe there were quite a few numbers in the latest report. to the effect of locating this here at all costs. Absolutely not. I think this has been a very comprehensive process. The siting process alone has been almost 3 years now, and a number of different studies we went over. I think there was 14 or so in total and more to come. So, you know, the criteria that we use to sort of land on this site in the first place, we're looking at some of those critical issues in terms of protection of groundwater and things like that, so we would avoid having to identify a site or pick a site and then get into those potential issues. So sensitive receptors, I think I've covered off. Fire protection, again, understand the concerns with that. We will be meeting with the fire chief to address all of their concerns, and we'll be required to meet the requirements of the Ontario Building Code, Fire Code as well. So that speaks to sprinkler systems or setbacks and things of that nature. And I think that's it.
Before I go to the people who are waiting for questions, I guess capacity concerns have been expressed in writing in tonight, and that is how much volume is being anticipated to handle the material recovery facility, the MMF, the OPF. First of all, what is the intent and time frame of the material recovery facility, and what capacity is being budgeted for initially in this total facility, beyond which will require coming back to council, the council today, and getting further approval to get any further capacity?
So in all the facilities, we have a 30-year sort of planning horizon in terms of projecting population growth and trends for waste generation. So the various facilities, the materials management facility will be the one that's established first. So that's a pure transfer facility, and the organics facility will follow that shortly thereafter. In terms of the materials recovery facility, I understand that some of the funding for the project overall is tied to having that facility as part of this. But as certain people pointed out, there are potential changes coming in terms of the regulation in Ontario that might affect the viability of having that facility. So that is why it's labeled potential future facilities. So that one is sort of to be decided on down the road.
So you talk about a 30-year time frame, but you have an initial estimate of how long this operation will be open in 24 hours. And so how much growth will be able to happen towards being open 24 hours a day without coming back to get approval for that growth, is sort of what I'm driving at. And so you talk about a 30-year time frame. Well, a lot's can happen in 30 years, obviously, and as you look to accumulate more product, more inventory, or not inventory, but product in this facility. So I'm trying to get an idea of how much this can grow before having to come back for approval for that growth.
So 30 years is basically the short answer, and in that planning timeline, we look at population projections and you know where that happens, as well as waste generation rates. So accounting for the growth in the population and the corresponding increase in waste generation in the county, we'd be able to accommodate that within the facility. Now, all of that capacity doesn't necessarily need to be established on day one. We would look at, you know, making the design flexible enough to accommodate sort of expansion within the approved footprint, but potentially building a smaller facility at first and growing that as the needs change throughout that 30-year timeline.
So in a week, what would you anticipate the initial hours of operation and daily hours of operation to be, and how would that change within, say, 5 to 10 years?
So the proposed hours of operation are detailed in the facility characteristics report. I believe it's 6 days a week from 7 a.m. Or slightly before that till about 7 p.m. So 12 hours, not 24 hours a day for receiving trucks. But that will be part of the ECA, the environmental compliance approval, will outline sort of operating hours, and it'll be limited to operating within those periods and other conditions as well. So in the future, if there's a need to change those, then that'll need to be revisited through further consultation with the township or also the ministry.
Thank you. Sir, your question.
Sean Fuller, 14 Pine Hill Drive in Phelpston. Two questions. One is the truck roadway, the 2 or 3 lane truck roadway that you propose to run through the forest to the facility. Is that part of the rezoning process to become industrialized? If not, why? And if so, are you going to extend your key receptive indicators or whatever you call it, your yellow dots, to move your distance to include the entrance of that truck roadway.
Okay, so pose your questions, please. We'll get the other two behind you and then give them a chance to.
So there's another question.
Yes.
You want to get in line?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. The other question is from a design, build, operating, maintain contract. Typically, the technologies are left to the proponents to bid on. My recommendation to the Township Council is to force the County Council to include these technologies based on the substantial public consultations that we've had and the concerns that we have and the technologies that we do want to see in this facility. What it should do is significantly drive the cost up of what this facility should be costed at in this area. And the county will see that it's clearly the wrong section.
Scarlett Graham, Strike Graham, please, Creature, for one question on the siting methodologies. You indicated that the evaluation, the criteria was a comparative analysis against existing sites. To address Councillor McConkey's question, of the 502 sites, how many were existing, functioning industrial parks? That'll be my first question. My second question is that there's been some concern over the private 500-meter club consultations with the county, that they were not necessarily recording the concerns verbatim. And this is one area where I have concerns, because tonight is the first time that I've heard Rainbow Valley Road East being used as an alternate access. Mr. McCullough had clearly stated at one of the other consultations that Rainbow Valley Road East would be an emergency access. So right away, in preparing our letters and everything else, the cost of upgrading or the use of Horseshoe Valley or Rainbow Valley Road East in this as a concern to the citizens who live on Rainbow Valley Road East was negated, and we didn't even prepare those. So this is the first time that I'm hearing alternate access. I'd just like to make that clear. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Chris White, 1336 Rainbow Valley Road, East. I have a question that the archaeological find, I understood we've moved that site when we found some findings there, right? Now, have we done an archaeological site where you've moved it? You have done that? Okay, thank you. One more question. Do we have any methods of controlling wildlife? Like bears, raccoons, mice, rats, seagulls. Is anything suggested there, or anything you guys have thought about that at all, or?
I can just,
okay.
I was reading the NVCA's comments, which are on the website. And again, I remind people, please refer to the website. We have a whole section on this. We keep it very current, so you can go and see the written comments. And there's about a 4 or 5 page letter from the Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority that does address wildlife in it and what they're questioning about it. It would behoove you to go and read that. And the county and GHD are in the process of coming up with responses to those. Thank you for your question. Hi.
Hi, Cindy Mercer, 1601 Rainbow Valley Road East. I have a question in regards to the challenges that you're facing with this project. And I would like you to be quite forthcoming and give us some information on particulars of what to date have caused delays and additional expenses in this project.
Okay, thank you. So Brian, based on the last 4 or 5 questions, any general comments?
Sure, I have a few. Again, hopefully I address everything here. The zoning on the roadway is under consideration, and that was in the context of notifying the near neighbors. So again, that buffer was set based on the property limit, so the roadways within the site and where they're located should not affect notifying any of those neighbors. Consultation will also happen at the procurement stage. Right now, What we're proposing for the materials management facility is a simple design build. It's very sort of generic building. There's not a lot of specialized aspects to it. Conversely, the organics processing facility would likely go through a design, build, and operate procurement process, which includes potential technology that is very specific to certain operators. So they're the best ones in terms of operating those types of facilities. The emergency access, so alternate emergency access. The access for the county vehicles, all the vehicles using this, is from Horseshoe Valley Road. The access from Rainbow Valley will be maintained solely for emergency vehicle access as an alternate if Rainbow Valley is not available.
Sorry, we can't, if you have a question, come and pose it, please, the mic.
Sorry, you were indicating to me and making eye contact, so I assume you're asking me. When Horseshoe Valley Road access is inaccessible for whatever reason, will garbage trucks be heading down Rainbow Valley Road East?
That is not the intent. Solely for emergency vehicle access from Rainbow Valley Road.
CAO Brindley, you have a comment, please?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This will come in through our comments too, because we have a lot of concerns with truck traffic using that road, because as those who live on it, it's not built to a standard to handle those vehicles. So that will come through our comments as well, because it is a concern. Our understanding is it's just for emergency use, not emergency to bypass the other road. It's emergency as in if emergency vehicles need to get in and out.
So I reiterate come on up. What we're hearing tonight, we're not providing answers or dispensing with any of the comments you're making. We're taking all these in. We're giving initial response of GHD and council and staff. But what will happen is all of this discussion plus the written submissions will be poured over in detail, will be addressed by county and GHD in a report to township planning. Township planning will use that to formulate a report to council, and it's at that time that council will really have to make a decision at the township level with respect to this. And the same thing in parallel is going on in county council. So I'll make a comment with respect to that in the closing comments, but welcome. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Suzanne Carlaw.
Can you move closer to the mic, please?
Sorry, my name
Walk
is
right up there so we can hear you. Lift it up there, whatever. That's it. Thank you.
My name is Suzanne Carlaw. I live at 2 Trillium Trail in Horseshoe Valley. I have two related questions and I have a comment. My first question is GHD opposed to, or would GHD not be supportive of an industrial site? So through taxpayers, we are paying consultants in this project. I would really like to know what GHD's input has been to the county regarding an industrial site. Secondly, my comment is that it appears by this sample tonight and 200 members of Friends of Simcoe Forests, and you can be sure that for every one who declares themselves either through membership or through communication, you can probably count at least another 30 who stay silent but are opposed. So it appears that there is considerable support, in fact, for a waste facility on an industrial site. So my next question is, who is opposed to the county acquiring an industrial site and why? And I would like to see that in writing. I also think you need to include in the business case the proposed expansion of Horseshoe Valley Road, which is, the last I heard, 22 million. And I think you're going to need to go outside the county with no disrespect to any fire marshal employed here and no disrespect whatsoever to county staff. You are going to need an expert on firefighting who has tremendous experience and has worked in other similar projects. And I don't think you're going to find that person resident here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Gerald Morgan, 1284 Floss Road 3 East, Phelpston. I have a question regarding what that lady just said about industrial land. On the short list, the one at Crown Hill by Napoleon Stove, you remember that one?
I do, yes.
How come it was turned down?
I'd have to go back to the report, but as I recall, there were issues in terms of size of that property. It was on the smaller end and would certainly restrict some of the flexibility. There was an environmentally protected area adjacent to that site, and there were also issues concerning the MTO raised concerns about upgrading the interchange there, so adding significant cost. So that's sort of speaks to industrial sites in general. I mean, they're not all created equal. We followed a comprehensive process looking at a long list of criteria and applied those to all of the sites, including the industrial ones.
Yeah, well, it appeared to me there was a lot more than, 11 acres that you needed?
17 hectares is what we identified as the minimum site size.
Oh, okay.
So that 4.5 for the facility itself, as well as the remaining for sort of on-site buffer.
Okay, so it was too small. Is that what you're
Correct.
saying?
That's one of the reasons. There were many, but again, I'd have to go back to the actual Part 3 report.
Okay, the next question is, has Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority, have they signed off on this yet?
They've been consulted throughout the process. They've raised a number of concerns. Speaking to the point about some of the delays and expenses, a lot of those were additional field works. We've gone out to the site numerous times. We continue to do so and meet with the NVCA as well as the MOE as well as other stakeholders to continue to address their concerns with this. And a lot of that has to do with additional field investigations specific to this site.
So they haven't signed off yet?
As I referred to, sir, on the website, there is a 5-page letter from NVCA commenting on the reports thus far and citing point by point where they want further information. So I would suggest that you go online to the township website and dig that up and read it. It's informative.
Okay, I'll do that.
And they haven't signed off on it. They're waiting for a response
Okay.
to the points they raised.
Good. In regards to that fire on Cherry Street, at that recycling plant, they had the fireboat there pumping millions of liters of water on that. And the problem is, if they try that up here, that's going to pollute Matheson Creek for years, pouring that much amount of water on a fire at that site. That'll go right down through, and I think Matheson Creek goes down into Nottawasaga, right? I think it does. I haven't walked it, but anyway, it's just a bad place for it. I hope that the township will consider it wisely and do the right thing. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Yes, sir.
Ed Kreitzer, 1286 Rainbow Valley Road East. From the beginning and all the site processing, the county has been diligent in reviewing all of their options for forest, for property. It was brought up in the county open public meeting by another gentleman, and I thought it was a very good idea. The city of Barrie is a big part of what will be happening with our facilities. They're going to be bringing up all their refuse, all their garbage. They're going to be a big part of what we do. And I was wondering why the city of Barrie hasn't been approached formally to provide the land. They have lots of industrial land. Why can't we have a partnership with the city of Barrie, not just the county of Simcoe or the township of Springwater? The city of Barrie is a very large entity in the county of Simcoe, and they have lots of industrial land. They have lots of vested interest in what happens. How come they're sitting back and we're going through this painful process of figuring out the problem ourselves, county and township. Where is the city of Barrie, who are the next biggest partner in this? They could provide the land. The county can provide all the buildings they need to, and they can do the industrial property at the south end, where most of this stuff is going to be heading down anyways. As the south end increases, the city of Barrie becomes more and more involved with this process.
Well, I certainly believe there's some communication with Barrie. So, Brian, can you summarize what communication occurred with Barrie?
My understanding is when this sort of process started, that they were consulted in terms of whether or not they wanted to be a part of it, and that they noted that potentially as a consumer to use the facilities, but in terms of siting and hosting the facilities, that's not something they wanted to entertain.
Councillor McConkie?
That sounds a little strange because I don't think we had a choice. So I don't know how Barrie got a choice.
Anything further on the community? Debbie, can you add anything to that with respect to what happened with Barrie? Thanks, Rod. Rod McCullough, maybe you'd come forward and elucidate on that point.
Certainly, we talked to both the potential separated cities, being Barrie and Orillia, about the possibility of wanting to be partners in this venture from the get-go because we saw some potential need. Neither was interested in being partners. They were certainly interested in potentially being customers down the road. We did this plan for the residents and businesses of Simcoe County that we provide service to, and therefore the search area was in the county of Simcoe because those are the primary people that we're providing this service to. When we looked at locations for it, that was necessarily in the county of Simcoe because those are the primary people we're trying to serve. With respect to Barrie and Orillia being potential customers, when you build something, you don't build a facility of this to be constrained to just the size that you need on the day you build it. You build it for what you need 30 years down the road, and what you do is look at bringing in obvious customers that can use that excess capacity in the beginning and kick them out as you grow to need all that transfer capacity yourself.
Just on that, do you have any idea the contracts, existing contracts for Barrie and Orillia, when they run out? And would it be an interest of theirs, as soon as they run out, to approach Simcoe, assuming that this was going to go ahead, to use the proposed facility?
We have, through you, Mr. Chair, we've kept Barrie and Orillia quite aware of our development strategy, if that's what you mean. That's up to them how they develop as they go forward. I know working with very closely with people in my role in Barrie and Orillia, they're looking at that as a possible avenue for the material that they generate. And when they're writing contracts, they're writing the possibility in. They're essentially they do the same thing we do. That essentially, if there's a new operation for recycling, they base the value of it in the contract based on a one-way kilometer per ton, so they can make an economic decision when and if that other avenue is available to them of being able to utilize it.
Maybe coming at it a different way, and I was going to ask about the current status of the business case. I believe in the report, Debbie, that you wrote recently to county that you're working closely with Ernst & Young to do the business case. Maybe you might just give an overview of where that's at, what it's going to involve, what the time frame is. But in the projections that Ernst & Young are working on with you, how soon are you including waste management to come from Barrie and or Orillia in the projections that are happening in the business case?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I've been working most directly with the business case. It might be an answer best coming from me. As we've pointed out in the report to council, we're looking to make the preliminary business case available to county council later this summer. The basis of that, I'm not willing to go and provide details here because we haven't even provided it to our board, being the members of Simcoe County. Essentially, what I can provide to you, though, is that the details of the business case, it's only being considered preliminary at this time because we have not yet selected the technology for the site. So we went out for a request for expressions of interest to a number of different technology vendors and suppliers and got some generic sort of pricing back in. We won't know specifically until the site is zoned and we go out for a full RFP, request for proposal, for this facility, what the technology, what the best value technology will come. However, this preliminary business case will give us some indication around the area, the type of technology that would be available to provide this at the volumes that we're anticipating, and the rough costing of what that would be on this site.
So the business case for both the preliminary, for both the MMF and the OPF portion will be available and coming to County Council in spring, another spring of...
Later this summer.
Later this summer.
We're looking late summer, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. McCullough? Yes, please come up if you have further questions. In the meantime, Councillor McConkie?
Questions for this chap?
Sorry, Councillor Coghlan, you had a...
Sorry.
Okay. Yes.
Mary Taylor, I'm already registered.
Just give it again if you
17
would.
Josephine Street, Prince Albert, Ontario.
Thank you.
Now I can't remember. This is the problem. I honestly can't remember what I just...
Well, go behind the next gentleman and
I'm
think about it.
going
And we're not going away anywhere soon.
No, I hope it isn't.
Sean Fuller, 14 Pine Hill Drive. Respectfully to the comment I just heard there, I do not think you need to go to having this land rezoned before you can price what the technologies are. You've had public consultations, you've heard the concerns, the technologies exist to mitigate those concerns, and they can be priced before you go to rezone the land. And if you don't do that, we're not going to know what the proper cost of this facility here is going to be versus in an industrialized zone.
Okay. While you're still thinking of the question, I'll go to Councillor McConkie.
Yeah, I have a question in regards to what the gentleman said, and there was a gentleman before that said that, we have to understand what we're doing, and I guess I go to planning and I ask them, when we're rezoning, at what point do we have to have all of our conditions in? Because I know it could be different than when we're doing a plan of subdivision and that. So I need to understand the planning of this because I want to know that we have enough information, that we have the proper conditions in when we're approving this.
Director Spagnol?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Allen, through you to Councillor McConkie. There's many different ways of including conditions of approval through a process such as this. Because we've got a zoning application here, what can be implemented is called a holding provision. And what that does is it says that before the property can be used for the purpose that it's going to be rezoned for, that certain things need to be completed. In this case here, we're talking about, as far as a process standpoint, site plan approval would be required prior to any development occurring on the site. It's through site plan approval that those specific conditions would be ironed out, but would all be tied to a holding provision, which means that those site plan agreements would need to be set in place before any site construction could occur. So those conditions that Councillor McConkie is speaking of would be addressed through the agreement process and can actually be specifically referenced within as part of a holding provision as certain things that need to be considered prior to development happening.
Follow-up, Councillor McConkie.
In follow-up, if we do not know the technology and we need a condition based on the technology, we could have missed it. And so can you have a holding and say, hey, I'm holding still based on the technology because I could add conditions?
Director Spagnol?
Through you, Deputy Mayor Allen to Councillor McConkie. There are many different agencies that are going to have to provide comment through this process as to what needs to be done on the site prior to the approvals going forward. One of the key considerations will be the approval of the MOE when it comes down to site operation and construction. It's at that point when the list of conditions will have to be included in all agreements. Planning will not move forward with any conditions or with any approvals until such time as planning is satisfied that there's been enough information been made available in order to be able to sign off on the zoning. But that's all hinged on the comments received from all of the agencies that are providing their input into this process. So the expectation is that because there's so many agencies looking at it, the required conditions to mitigate and provide for some of the safety measures that are being considered here today will be considered as part of the process and should be well known before we get to a point of final approval.
Thank you. Yes, your question, please.
Mary Taylor, I have a question about, you keep saying approval. Who is it that's approving it? Where does the approval come from?
Okay, Director Spagnol, maybe run through that again, please.
Well, yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Allen. So there are two amendments that are being considered. There is an official plan amendment that is being considered at the county level. In that case there, it's provincial approval. With the case of the local amendments, so those are the local official plan amendments and the local zoning bylaw amendment, Council works with the County of Simcoe. The County of Simcoe is the approval authority, but takes direction from the council of this municipality to endorse an official plan amendment, and the township is the approval authority for the zoning bylaw.
Thank you.
Yes. Karen.
Karen Smith, 29 Lawrence Avenue. I'm a little bit confused about the selection process. When I asked the consultants about the selection process, they said that they were working within the constraints that the county had placed upon them. And one of those constraints was that the property had to be owned by the County of Simcoe. Now, I'm a little confused because the words partnering and asking Barry if they were interested in partnering does not necessarily mean were they interested in providing industrial land or if they had industrial land that was available. So that's a little bit confusing. Thank you.
Would you like to, can you address that now, Brian, possibly? Thanks.
Yeah, so with respect to the siting process, there are 3 reports that I can point you to that detail the different aspects of that process. Private sites were included in the site selection or evaluation process. There were 502 sites included in the evaluation that spanned essentially the entire county, with the exception of Base Borden, some First Nations land, and the city of Barrie and Orillia. So they were not included within the search area for this facility. However, 502 properties were identified all across the county and narrowed down through the process. So to speak to a couple of the comments from earlier, archaeological assessment was done on not the entire property, but a great deal of it, anything that would be disturbed. So that's all of your access roads as well as the footprint you see there and the previous footprint, which would have gone a little bit further north to where that red area has been identified now. So the archaeological assessment covered quite a few different areas of the site. In terms of wildlife control, that's something that we'll be working through with our ecologist. There will be a fence around the entire facility footprint, so we look to control certain aspects that way. In terms of our overall position on this project, and it's not just myself, I mean, GHD has been involved, as I said, for about 3 years now on this, and a number of different professionals from ecologists, hydrogeologists, planners, noise, odor specialists have all looked at this and provided their input on this. So, and where we don't have the expertise, we've gone outside. So archaeologists, traffic or transportation planning, agricultural assessment. So all of these professionals have had input in this process. And I can definitively say that through this process, the sites that we looked at, this is the best site for this facility.
Okay, next question, please. Oh, sorry, sorry, before you do, Councillor Cognan.
Apologies. I was going to follow up as the last time we addressed this, but just so that when we leave here tonight, it's clear. When, no, this is for you. You can stay there. So when you asked Barrie, you did not ask Barrie if they wanted to host the location. You asked Barrie if they wanted to be involved in the business as a partner. Because I don't want residents thinking that Barrie had an opportunity to veto being a host. is what I want to make sure. Was Barrie asked if they wanted to host such facility?
I'd have to defer to the county. What I do know is that they were not included as part of the search area. So this was for Simcoe County, and Barrie and Orillia and other areas were excluded from the search area for the facility. So whether that was directly as a result of consultation with Barrie or Orillia, I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Councillor McConkey?
Follow up to what Councillor Coughlin's talking and also talking to the transportation. I'd like to understand if Barrie and Orillia, since they said, well, maybe they will be included one day, have we included them in the traffic studies?
In the traffic, yeah, absolutely. So accommodating, well, so the volume is set. You, again, Rob alluded to this earlier about building the facility sort of not for what you need tomorrow, but sort of into the future, right? So we've looked at 30 years. Again, that might not be built all at the same time, but you build it for more than you need currently, and in the interim, you have excess capacity, then you can then share with other municipalities, for example.
So through all the traffic routes and everything, you've looked at all of the traffic coming up from Barrie, and with its potential growth, and with Orillia's potential growth?
So in siting the facility, one of the key considerations was what we call the waste centroid, and that's essentially where all of the material is being generated. So knowing that Barrie and Orillia could potentially be a part of that in the future, they were considered in terms of siting where that would be to accommodate that potential future growth. In terms of the transportation impacts, those were, I believe, isolated to the area sort of around the site.
Okay, next.
The traffic volume is going to be really highly impacted in the south of Springwater going to that location from Barrie. If you were only looking around the site and not further south, the transportation impacts to the major development that's happening in the south of Springwater, and I don't know the route that you're expecting them to take, but
I guess there isn't one defined route. I guess these trucks come from all over the county of Simcoe, so they come from every possible direction. So, I mean, they are drawn to sort of major transportation hubs, so a lot of them would be coming from the 400, a lot of them would be coming from Rainbow Valley Road, but ultimately they come from all different directions.
Okay, next question, please.
Linda Van Kasteren, 3088 Horseshoe Valley Road West. Could you please direct me to a document or a map that will highlight for me the distances from the footprint to the boundaries of the property?
In the planning justification report, there are a number of figures that identify boundary or buffer distances between the sensitive receptors and the facility footprint.
Not the sensitive receptors, from the footprint to the edges of the property. So how far from the footprint to Rainbow Valley Road, also to Horseshoe Valley Road, and to the east and west? Boundaries of the actual property.
So they are listed. I can show you actually.
Please.
So this figure here includes northings and eastings, so coordinates on the property of where the facility footprint would be located. So if there's specific distances to property boundaries or sensitive receptors or other aspects, we can certainly get them from these coordinates.
So can I look on this, sorry, don't mean to be naive, but how do I, as an individual, figure out how far that footprint is from Horseshoe Valley Road?
So you can refer to the maps that have been provided in
This
the reports,
map?
or this is part of a larger map that was included in the various reports. So
Okay.
those distances are certainly identified, but also on Google Maps, for example, there's features you can use to, if you look at the coordinates that are included here, you can sort of map it out and get distances to anything you like.
Oh, okay.
It is in planning rationale, not a figure, but the measures are there. Horseshoe Valley Road.
Sir, can I ask you come to the mic, because there are people that are tuning into this, and they won't hear your answer otherwise.
Yes, sorry, there are measurements in the planning rationale report, but there is not a figure, which is what you asked. I don't believe, I've flipped through quickly, I believe the only figure that shows measures was to sensitive receptors, so they go off on angles. But the straight line distance is Horseshoe Valley Road, 660 meters, 500 meters on the north, 110 meters on the western property line, so from the west boundary westerly to the property line, and 259 meters to the eastern property line.
Okay, and where do I find that document? Sorry, in the county,
It should be online.
the county or the township?
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
The question is this document, which is a planning justification report, is it on the township?
Director Spangler,
But-
please, and maybe follow up with, if they could ask you the specific question, we could get the specific information.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Allen. All of the reports submitted through the local applications are provided online, including the planning justification report. If Ms. Van Kasteren wants to talk with staff later to go find the specific mapping and the actual the detail for the amendments, I'd be happy to discuss that with her at a later date.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coghlan.
Thank you. And just for clarification, when we were asking about the main routes of transportation, it was offered 400 and Rainbow Valley, but I'm sure you meant Horseshoe Valley, because there's a lot of residents here that live. Okay, just for clarification.
Okay, are there any, everybody's just so patient, time. We haven't, oh, here's another question, that's good. Thank you.
Suzanne Carlaw, 2 Trillium Trail. Previous speaker raised a really interesting comment. I'm not sure that she posed it as a question. She said that she had been told, I believe by the consultant, that they were working with constraints from the county, that the site had to be county-owned land. I'd like to know whether or not that is the case, and why, if that was a constraint. I'd also like to know what was discussed with Barry and Aurelia in terms of partnering, and I'd like to know if the constraint of having to be county-owned land was established before or after talking to Barry and Aurelia. Thank you.
Who would like to? Do you want to do that, Brian or Rod, or?
Yeah, I can certainly speak to part of that in terms of privately owned sites. So out of the 502 that were considered initially, I believe it's approximately 200 of them were privately owned. So it was open to both county-owned sites as well as privately owned sites. And on the privately owned site or side of things, we looked at properties available for sale listed on the MLS through residential and commercial properties, as well as went through a request for expression of interest in terms of any willing vendors that would be willing to sell their property to host this facility. So through that process, about 200 privately owned sites were identified and evaluated as part of the process.
Okay, thank you. So if there are no more questions or comments, I thank you for coming out and your patience and professionalism in attending and providing valuable comments and questions. Thank you, GHD and the county, for good dialogue, and of course staff and council members. We are taking this very seriously. We're delving into a lot of detail that, and all your comments are very, very valuable and will be considered. So we have a resolution that this public meeting of council held under Section 34 of the Planning Act of OP 21605 and ZB 216-021, County of Simcoe Environmental Resource Recovery Center applications does now adjourn at 8:52 p.m. Can I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Coghlan, seconded by Ritchie. All in favor? Carried. Again, thank you for attending, and keep checking the website, and thank you for those who joined us in streaming. Good night. Okay. That's right, that's right. I was looking at this instead of this. Okay, council, we have to do some administrative stuff. Motion that bylaw 2017-047 to confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the regular meeting held on June 19, 17, listed here and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk, deputy mayor and clerk. Moved by Coghlan, Councillor Coghlan, second by Ritchie. All in favor? Carried. And that the special meeting of the Township Spring Order is now adjourned at 8:53 p.m. to meet again in regular meeting on June 21 at 6:30 p.m. in council chambers, Administrative Center. Moved by Coghlan, second by Ritchie. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Are we done there?